This leak is more than a headline, it's a warning shot. Harley didn't just miscalculate, they triggered a rebellion that's spreading fast. Watch till the end, because when this kind of trust breaks, it changes what every rider and investor believes is safe. They canceled the core. The leak didn't come from some corporate press release or PR stunt, it came from inside. A confidential document circulated to Harley-Davidson's top leadership, outlining a roadmap for the next 5 years, was leaked to a small group of independent dealers, and within hours it exploded online. Buried inside that document was a single, devastating sentence. Harley-Davidson would be sunsetting the Sportster and Nightster lines. These weren't just bikes, they were symbols. They were stories. They were the machines fathers passed to sons, the first rides of young rebels, the badge of honor for mechanics, veterans, truckers, and anyone who ever believed in grit and steel. Harley didn't just kill 2 models, they amputated a core part of their identity. For more than 6 decades, the Sportster represented everything raw, stripped down, and working class about the Harley brand. The Nightster was the newer cousin designed to appeal to younger urban riders, many of whom finally stepped into Harley ownership because of its accessibility. Canceling both, without warning, without tribute, without a transition plan, sent a thunderous message. The old guard no longer matters. The memo gave no tribute, no recognition, no farewell to 2 of the most iconic builds in Harley's lineup. Just a quiet execution in pursuit of what the memo described as a tech-forward, margin-aligned brand evolution. And the worst part? Leadership didn't leak it, workers did. They were the first to see it, and they were the first to panic. Some dealers tried to pretend it was a rumor, but the document was real, and it was damning. What followed wasn't a redesign, it was a cultural amputation. If you've ever ridden a Harley, or even dreamed of owning one, drop a like to show you're watching. And tell us in the comments, do you think this move is fixable, or is the brand past the point of no return? Your voice matters more than ever. The sound of loss. When the news broke, you didn't hear outrage first. You heard silence. The kind of silence that falls after a funeral. Then the emails started coming. Then the videos. Then the threads lit up. Vietnam vets, steel workers, cross-country riders in their 50s and 60s, men and women who had been loyal to the brand for 40 or 50 years. I bought my first Sportster in 1982, one Wisconsin rider posted. I'm done. I'm not interested in a company that wants to be a tech company instead of a motorcycle company. Clubs posted blacked-out Harley logos. Mechanics shared photos of old Sportsters in their garages with captions like, "Last of the real ones." On Reddit, one writer said, "They're killing the soul to chase Wall Street." It wasn't just that Harley made a corporate decision, it was that they made a cultural erasure. In a world already flooding with synthetic branding and plastic performance, the Sportster stood for something authentic, and Harley walked away from it like it was dead weight. Dealers across the Midwest said they had customers cancel pre-orders. Young riders who were looking at the Nightster as their entry into the Harley family started looking elsewhere. Used bike prices for those models jumped overnight, not because people were speculating, but because they were preserving something they feared would never return. Harley didn't just kill a product line, they killed a symbol of working-class identity. Buried in that same memo was a revelation that cracked the tribe wide open. Harley's image is cracking, but your gear shouldn't. In the description, we listed the jackets, gloves, and accessories real riders trust. Suit up with function, not branding. Zeitz pulled the plug. Harley-Davidson's new direction wasn't an accident. It was a board-approved, CEO-driven, data-justified reinvention. Jochen Zeitz, the company's chief executive since 2020, had been clear about his vision: lean into premium. Focus on high-margin touring bikes and electric innovation. Sell fewer bikes, but make more money per unit. From a spreadsheet perspective, it was ruthlessly efficient. From a brand perspective, it was cultural suicide. Zeitz's plan was to make Harley relevant to the future, which apparently meant spinning off Livewire, pushing a minimalist adventure bike, and distancing the company from its chrome and iron roots. Harley didn't fall into decline, they planned it. The leaked memo didn't just show product changes, it showed segmentation strategies. urban customers in Tokyo, affluent Gen X riders in London, and most tellingly a section called Legacy Phase-Out Strategy that detailed the exit timeline for heritage models. There was no plan to support the rider base that made Harley global. No outreach to clubs, no partnership with legacy dealerships. Just an assumption that somehow these people would stay loyal out of nostalgia while the company rebranded around a tech future aesthetic. It was arrogance dressed in market logic. It was strategy with no soul. Those choices didn't just sting, they cleared the path for Harley's most unforgivable move. Thailand, not Milwaukee. One more line in the document hit harder than any of the product changes. Production of key models, including parts of the Revolution Max lineup, was being shifted permanently to Thailand. Not temporarily, not partially, permanently. Harley-Davidson, the red-blooded symbol of American rebellion, of Milwaukee steel, of made in the USA pride, was moving its heart to Southeast Asia. For riders and workers alike, this wasn't business. It was betrayal. Union leaders in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin erupted. Longtime factory workers who had given Harley decades of their lives learned from online leaks that their jobs were being gutted. One union rep called it a corporate gut punch. Harley tried to spin it as a tariff workaround for international markets. But no one bought it. Riders didn't want to hear logistics. They wanted to know why their brand no longer believed in the very country that made it great. The optics were brutal. On social media, images of Thai production facilities were juxtaposed with Harley's old Buy American ad campaigns. YouTubers with hundreds of thousands of subscribers declared the brand officially dead. Comment sections turned into digital biker bar brawls. And worse, other American-made brands seized the opportunity. Indian Motorcycles released an ad the next day that said, "Still American, still Thunder." It went viral in hours. While Harley scrambled to contain the outrage, a second fire was already spreading across America. Young riders said no. Inside the same leaked document that revealed the product cuts and overseas shift, there was another revelation that rattled insiders just as much as the factory floor fallout. Harley-Davidson had conducted a 2-year internal research initiative on buyer behavior across 3 key regions: North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia. The findings were brutal. Across the board, buyers aged 18 to 35 showed almost no interest in the brand. Among American Gen Z consumers, Harley scored lowest on name recognition in the motorcycle category, below even smaller budget competitors like Royal Enfield. Among millennials, Harley was seen as outdated, intimidating, and most commonly, too expensive. Executives knew they were losing the cultural thread. What was once a rite of passage had become a brand relic. In one internal presentation, marketing staff highlighted that fewer than 1 in 20 urban 20-somethings could identify a Harley model by name. That number was closer to 1 in 3 just 15 years ago. In focus groups, younger riders expressed admiration for stripped-down modern bikes like the Yamaha XSR or the retro-styled Honda Rebel, machines with the look and feel of rebellion but none of the baggage or cost. For Harley, that was terrifying. Their name, once synonymous with cool, had faded into an overpriced cliché. And yet, faced with this knowledge, Harley didn't invest in rebuilding the bridge. They didn't revisit their pricing model, redesign the Sportster for Gen Z, or lean into nostalgic minimalism. They doubled down on something else entirely, something most riders never asked for. Faced with rejection, leadership didn't double down, they lit a fuse. Livewire lit the wrong fire. Livewire was supposed to be the future. Sleek, silent, and high-tech, it was Harley-Davidson's moonshot. When it launched in 2019, Harley pushed the narrative hard. An American electric motorcycle with attitude aimed at urban riders and forward-looking enthusiasts. But almost immediately, cracks began to show. The bike's starting price, just under $30,000, was a massive turnoff for the very young buyers Harley was trying to attract. And the traditional rider base? They didn't just reject it, they mocked it. To the hardcore Harley community, Livewire didn't just lack sound, it lacked soul. The iconic rumble of a V-twin wasn't just a noise, It was identity, history, ritual. Riders had trained their ears to hear horsepower. When Livewire rode by, it sounded like a laptop booting up. You couldn't customize it, couldn't wrench on it the same way, couldn't pass it down to your kids. It wasn't an evolution, it was an abandonment. Worse, Livewire soon became its own spin-off company, separating from Harley-Davidson proper in a public SPAC deal that baffled even investors. What was supposed to be the next frontier became an orphan project with unclear leadership, niche appeal, and no meaningful market traction. Dealerships didn't know how to sell it. Buyers didn't know why it existed. Meanwhile, Harley's core lineup withered on the vine, starved for upgrades, attention, or innovation. Behind those glowing press releases, something darker was boiling in the boardroom. The board turned on itself. When Harley's quarterly earnings continued to slide and customer loyalty began to evaporate, it wasn't just riders who took notice. In early 2024, activist hedge fund H Partners launched a full-blown proxy battle to overhaul Harley-Davidson's leadership. They blamed Jochen Zeitz directly for what they called a premium-only strategy with no consumer foundation, and they didn't stop with words. H Partners nominated their own directors to the board, forced emergency shareholder votes, and began a public campaign called Free the Eagle, designed to mobilize frustrated investors against Harley's executive team. Inside sources described a toxic power struggle. Senior board members resigned quietly, some citing philosophical differences. Others were pushed out more aggressively. Meetings became battlegrounds, with lawyers present and private equity firms circling like sharks. One finance officer leaked an internal deck showing how much capital had been burned on Livewire's rollout, with no return. The number was staggering. More than $400 million spent and fewer than 6,000 units sold globally. Jochen Zeitz held firm, insisting Harley had to evolve or die. But for many in the boardroom, it already looked like a slow-motion collapse. Longtime shareholders feared a hostile takeover. The brand's credit rating was downgraded. Even dealership groups began threatening to pull out of promotional co-op programs unless they saw change at the top. The boardroom wasn't just cracking, it was splitting apart. Yet the most powerful pushback wouldn't come from the suits, it came from the streets. Garages became battlegrounds. The resistance didn't begin with hedge funds or corporate lawyers. It started in garages, group chats, and late-night message boards. Grassroots Harley riders from backroad Arkansas to the boroughs of New York City began organizing boycotts, protest rides, and digital walkouts. Facebook groups like Save the Sportster and Bring Back the Real Harley surged to over 100,000 members in less than a month. Influencers on TikTok and YouTube rallied their audiences to stop buying new Harleys and start restoring old ones. Some even filmed themselves canceling hog memberships and mailing in protest letters to headquarters. But it wasn't just noise. It became coordinated. Riders began tracking which dealerships were cutting service hours. They started creating maps of where to get parts for classic builds, bypassing Harley's ecosystem entirely. Some launched DIY startup brands to support modding and repairs for discontinued lines. A few even began printing custom decals with slogans like "Loyal, Not Blind" and "My Harley Wasn't Built in Thailand." Dealerships, squeezed between shrinking inventory and outraged customers, quietly began forwarding letters and emails to regional reps. One dealership owner in Iowa said, "I've never seen customers this mad, and I've never felt this powerless." And as the rebellion picked up steam, Harley's leadership realized they had activated something far more dangerous than a balance sheet protest. They had provoked a cultural counterstrike. That grassroots fury would soon trigger the corporate collapse no one saw coming. Towns lost their thunder. In the past, when a Harley-Davidson dealership opened in a small town, it was like a local event. Bikers showed up from miles around. Kids sat on the display bikes. The smell of rubber and leather filled the air, and small businesses from diners to barbershops felt the lift. Those days are fading. Fast. In just the last 2 years, Harley-Davidson has closed more than 100 dealerships across the United States. Many of these were in rural or blue-collar areas where Harley wasn't just a motorcycle brand, It was part of the local economy. In a western Pennsylvania town, a Harley dealership closed after 5 decades. The diner lost 30% of its traffic. A mechanic laid off staff. The owner called it a funeral without a body. Harley disappeared not just locally, but culturally. Without dealers, there are no demo rides, no rally meetups, no tech support or warranty work. Riders feel cut off. New buyers have to drive 2 hours just to see a model in person. Online forums exploded with complaints from customers who can't find parts or schedule service. For the first time in decades, owning a Harley feels less like a lifestyle and more like a burden. As the shockwaves spread through main streets, politicians took aim at the brand's integrity. Patriotism versus profit. The factory cuts and dealership closings triggered a chain reaction in state capitals and Washington, D.C. Within weeks of the leaked strategy memo, lawmakers from Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio were on the steps of the Capitol, calling for Harley to reverse course. At the center of their frustration was the offshore production strategy. Moving critical manufacturing to Thailand during an economic squeeze felt like a slap in the face to American workers. A bipartisan coalition urged investigation into Harley's tariff loopholes, accusing it of dodging U.S. obligations while cutting American jobs. A Milwaukee congresswoman's rebuke, Harley turned its back on those who built it, went viral, igniting the Bring It Back Home campaign nationwide. Political candidates seized the moment. Campaign ads began featuring empty Harley dealerships and shuttered factory gates. In one ad, a retired welder held up his Harley jacket and said, "I wore this for 30 years. Now they tell me my job's going to Bangkok?" The line went viral. Local mayors threatened to pull tax incentives. Governors floated the idea of import penalties. Harley had not just miscalculated the mood of its riders. It had underestimated the political cost of walking away from its American roots. With the nation watching, Harley made a move that left even loyalists stunned. Harley split in two. In the middle of all the noise, dealer protests, union fury, political heat, Harley quietly finalized the spinoff of its electric division, Livewire. Formed in 2021 as a separate brand, Livewire was supposed to be Harley's ticket to the future, but in the chaos of 2024, it looked more like an escape pod. The move was executed through a SPAC merger, pulling in outside investors and officially distancing Livewire from Harley-Davidson's core business. Livewire's spinoff looked like innovation, but insiders saw abandonment. R&D vanished, classic models aged, loyal buyers felt ignored, and unsold electric bikes gathered dust in showrooms, symbolizing a drained brand identity and a company gambling everything on a gamble no one asked for. Dealers were furious. One compared it to shoving an iPhone into a cigar lounge. They didn't have the tools, the technicians, or the customer base to sell electric bikes that cost nearly $30,000. Riders didn't want them. Employees didn't know how to maintain them. And now, Harley wasn't even backing them. The message was clear. If you were looking for a classic Harley, you were no longer part of the plan. But the backlash didn't stop at the boardroom. It went viral, loud, and global. The internet piled on. If Harley thought the backlash would stay confined to forums and protest rides, they were dead wrong. The moment the spinoff hit the news, content creators across YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram unloaded on the brand with laser precision. Motorcycle vloggers with hundreds of thousands of followers dropped videos titled "Harley is Dead," "Livewire Killed the Legacy," and "This is Why I Sold My Harley." In one particularly brutal video, a creator walked through a dealership where 5 Livewires sat untouched. "They've been here for 4 months," he said. "Not a single one sold." The takedowns were more than rants. They were receipts. Creators showed screenshots of parts backlogs, customers turned away by understaffed service centers, and emails from dealerships quietly warning that prices were about to rise. Some influencers staged mock funerals for their Harleys. Others mocked the premium pivot with parody ads. Black and white shots of a silent Livewire rolling past shuttered factories overlaid with the words, "Revolution repackaged." Meme warfare followed. Posts of Harley jackets stitched with RIP flooded social media. One popular meme showed a live wire plugged into a wall next to a gravestone that read, "Sportster 1957 to 2024. Even non-writers jumped in, mocking Harley's corporate image as tone-deaf and obsolete. The cultural damage spread faster than any press release could contain, and the sales numbers began to reflect it. Just as the memes reached peak venom, Harley's rivals pounced with precision. Indian closed in. The vacuum left by Harley-Davidson didn't last long. While the company was tangled in spin-offs, dealer closures, and public relations disasters, its rivals moved swiftly and decisively. Indian Motorcycles, Harley's most direct American competitor, launched a revamped version of the Scout. Retro-styled, affordably priced, and explicitly marketed toward disillusioned Harley riders. The message wasn't subtle. Their ad campaign read, "Still loud, still American, still here." It landed like a hammer. Indian Scout sales jumped 30% in 3 months. BMW slashed R18 prices, Honda promoted the Rebel 1100, and Kawasaki and Yamaha revived vintage lines. Each targeting Harley's disillusioned base with value, style, and accessibility Harley could no longer match. The shift wasn't symbolic, it was measurable. Harley's market share in the midweight cruiser segment plummeted. Riders looking for authenticity, sound, and tradition no longer saw Harley as the only choice. They saw Indian as the better American option, BMW as the premium innovator, and Japanese brands as the practical realists. Harley, meanwhile, was stuck in the middle of an identity crisis and losing its grip. Once the industry pivoted, investors started looking for exits of their own. The stock tanked. The numbers told a brutal story. Harley-Davidson stock, already battered by lukewarm earnings reports, took a nosedive after the Livewire spin-off and dealer shutdowns. Over the course of 6 months, Harley's share price dropped by more than 40%. Institutional investors pulled back. Pension funds flagged Harley as a watch list asset, and several mid-sized suppliers canceled parts contracts, citing volatility risk. Harley's finances unraveled fast. Costs rose, revenues fell, and Livewire burned cash without profit. Core sales dropped nearly 20%, global growth stalled, and even Harley's once reliable apparel line declined sharply as backlash spread across riders, regions, and lifestyle segments alike. Then came the credit downgrades. Major ratings agencies flagged Harley for brand instability and revenue fragility. That triggered immediate restrictions on future borrowing and froze several expansion projects. Investors who once saw Harley as a stable, iconic long-term bet now viewed it as a liability. Once the darling of the American manufacturing story, Harley had become a textbook case of how not to manage a brand transition. But while Wall Street cut their losses, workers chose to draw their battle lines. Labor drew a line. In the wake of the Thailand production shift and cascading dealership closures, organized labor had seen enough. The unions representing Harley's factory workers in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania launched a multi-front campaign calling for a return to American manufacturing, transparency in board decisions, and reinstatement of jobs cut under Jochen Seitz's leadership. Their slogans were sharp: "You can't offshore loyalty," and "We built the brand, you buried it." Thousands of Harley workers organized walkouts, sit-ins, and media actions backed by national labor leaders and politicians. Harley stayed silent, but when images of picket lines and generational pride hit the news, that silence collapsed under growing public and political pressure. The unions were not just fighting for jobs, they were fighting for recognition. For decades, Harley had positioned itself as a blue-collar badge of pride. Now those same workers were being told the future lay elsewhere, powered by batteries assembled half a world away. One labor leader said it plainly: "They want our history, but not our hands." Negotiations stalled, threats of strikes escalated, and Harley's leadership, already losing investors and customers, now faced full-scale rebellion from within. Yet the real lesson, the warning to every rider, investor, and legacy brand, was still coming. What just happened to Harley could happen to any legacy brand next, and when it does, we'll be here to break it down. Subscribe now, because this isn't just motorcycle news, it's a warning for every consumer, investor, and worker. Don't miss what the headlines won't tell you next. This is bigger than Harley. This isn't just a story about Harley-Davidson, it's a warning. It's a signal to every brand that built its name on loyalty, legacy, and emotion. If you turn your back on the people who built you, they won't stick around. They'll leave, they'll remember, and they'll never come back the same. For riders, it means asking hard questions. Does your bike still represent something, or is it just a brand in transition? Do you feel proud to wear the logo, or does it feel like marketing? Is the sound you fell in love with being replaced by silence, not because it's better, but because it's cheaper? For consumers and investors, legacy is no longer a guarantee of stability. If a brand evolves without honoring its roots, it risks collapse. Harley's attempt to modernize severed its identity, triggering backlash from workers, riders, dealers, and shareholders alike. What happened to Harley isn't just a fluke, it's a case study. As more companies pivot toward tech, electric platforms, or global supply chains, they must remember the one thing Harley forgot. You can't disrupt your foundation and expect the house to stand. The culture, the community, is not optional. It's everything. Because if Harley can fall this fast, who's next? Harley didn't just make a bad call, they lit the fuse on their own legacy. What you just saw isn't about motorcycles. It's about identity, labor, and what happens when a brand forgets who built it. If this hit you, if you felt it in your gut, don't just click away. Like the video to push this story further, drop a comment with your take because your voice keeps this conversation alive, and most importantly, subscribe right now. This isn't the last brand that's going to fall. The next one might be your favorite, your job, your town. Stay ahead of the curve because here we don't just report the collapse, we show you where it starts.